Hey, what's up 7th grade? Mr. Josh here. Welcome to Logic class online. Today we're going to be going over lesson 9 in our intro to logic. So make sure you have your notebooks ready and something to write with because you want to make sure you do take notes in this section. Today's lesson is actually something you guys are very familiar with. Today's lesson is arguments. So we'll jump right into it. Again, a lot of this information you already know, but we're going to continue with our curriculum. So even if you do know it, this is a good reminder just going forward. So we all immediately have images pop into our mind when we hear the word argument. We usually imagine two people yelling at each other about how they're right and the other person is wrong.
Loud noises!
In logic, this is not an argument. It's actually considered a fight. In logic, an argument has nothing to do with raised voices.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
An argument is a set of reasons or statements that support a certain conclusion. An argument should include whatever statements are necessary to prove the conclusion that you have chosen. Those statements are called premises. So an example of an argument would be what a lawyer uses to prove the guilt or the innocence of a person. They present their evidence to a judge and to a jury, and eventually they come to a conclusion. It's the judge's or the jury's responsibility to decide whether their argument was sufficient to prove their conclusion. Think of an argument like this. An argument is simply you trying to prove or share a point with someone else. And you use premises to do that. So every time you use a premise, those are the building blocks to your argument. So say I'm trying to make my argument and I establish my first premise. The foundation is laid, heading toward my conclusion somewhere up here. I keep making these premises, I keep having these statements, and this argument tower keeps getting higher and higher and higher until finally I reach my conclusion. Here's an example of an argument. Maybe you want to convince your parents to allow you to stay up a little bit later tonight. You might say something like,
"Hey Dad, I was just wondering if I could stay up a little bit later tonight to play some extra video games."
Son, why should I let you stay up later?
I don't have to wake up early tomorrow. I don't have to be at school.
Son, that is a good point. Why else should I let you stay up later?
Well, I washed the dishes this morning, so maybe that's deserving of an award or something.
Are you saying you should be rewarded for something you're already supposed to do?
in order for an argument to do its job,
it must make sense.
Write that down, write that down!
each statement should build upon the last. The eventual end to all the statements should lead to the conclusion. Let's go ahead and move on to our exercises so we can get a better understanding of premises and arguments. So our first exercise reads, match the following premise, which is on the left, with the corresponding arguments on the right. So A, it says, eating a proper diet is the first step towards living a healthy life. B says, I always do all my chores on time without ever having to be reminded. C says, make sure you clean the surface of the skin with soap and water before getting started. And D says, they're called man's best friend for a reason. So each of the statements on the left are premises to build up an argument. And the goal of this exercise is to take those premises and match them up with the correct argument. So let's look at number 1 on the right. Getting a raise on your allowance. So let's look at the premises on the left and see which one would probably best match with that one. Is it A, eat a proper diet? That doesn't seem like it would do anything with an allowance. C says make sure the surface of your skin is clean. That doesn't seem like it has anything to do with an allowance. D says they're called man's best friend. Still not really showing anything having to do with an allowance. But B, it says I always do all my chores on time without ever having to be reminded. If you are trying to establish an argument and your end goal or the conclusion being you want to get a raise on your allowance, B might be a very good point you would make to your parents. I always do all my chores on time without ever having to be told. Go ahead and work out the rest of the problems on your own. These do not need to be written down, but read over each question and see if you can match up each premise with the correct argument. Pause the video so you can work out these questions, and then click play whenever you're ready to see the answers. How did you do? Pretty well, I hope. Overall, this isn't a very difficult exercise, but the purpose of it is to get you thinking about different premises that could lead you to the proper conclusion of an argument. Okay, let's take a look at another exercise. This one reads, which of the statements is not a good premise to the argument? Right beneath the instructions, we have our argument. It says, your parents should buy you a new bike. Imagine that you are walking up to your parents, and your argument, what you want to convince your parents of, is that you want them to buy you a new bike. We don't know why you want them to buy you a new bike, but we just know you want them to buy you a new bike. These are some of the things you might say to your parents. So let's begin reading. The first premise says, bicycles are a fun way to promote a healthy lifestyle. Now, if you were to go up to your parents and say this as an argument for why they should get you a bike, I think that sounds like a great premise, right? Riding a bike is fun, but it also helps promote a healthy lifestyle. That's like a two birds with one stone type thing. I think that would be a great premise. Let's look at number two. By riding a bike, I can get to school in half the time compared to walking. Now, if you're a person who walks to school, and if it takes a while, and you don't have another means of transportation, then riding a bike may be a good go-to for you. So if you're that person and you're in need of a bike to get to school quicker, then premise number two would probably be a good argument to present to your parents. And the last one says, my friend Billy has a bike, so why can't I? Now, this premise comes off as the weakest premise to me. My friend Billy has a bike, so why can't I? There's no real value in that premise when you speak it. All you're saying is your friend Billy has it, so you should also have a bike. And if you were to go and tell this to your parents, they'd probably say something like, if your friend Billy jumped off the cliff, would you also jump off the cliff? Using a statement like this does not build up an argument, but it's just adding a comparison between you and a friend. The fact that he has a bike and you do not. And that has no value to actually building up your argument to hopefully meet your conclusion. So obviously, 3 would be the weakest premise for this argument. Thank you, 7th grade, for watching this video. I hope it helped. As this video comes to an end right now, I just want to add one more rule, and I'll put it on the screen now.